Why would someone who dines at your table, claps at your victories, and prays with you, secretly enjoy seeing you fall, because your rising threatens their carefully hidden pain, because your healing reminds them of wounds they've never dared to face? Because every time you shine, they are forced to confront their own darkness, and so, without even realizing it, they become mirrors, but not of celebration. They reflect something darker: envy, unspoken resentment, and shame. The truth is, your success exposes their shadows, not because you did anything wrong, but because light always reveals what's been hiding in the dark. This is why you must listen closely to this message, because not only will it reveal who secretly rejoices in your downfall, but it will help you understand the spiritual forces behind this behavior and how to rise above it without becoming bitter. The Bible warns us in Proverbs 14:30, "A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones." Some people are rotting on the inside, and your progress feels like salt on their wounds. So before you doubt yourself, before you silence your voice, before you stop obeying God just to make others feel comfortable, let me show you the deep psychological patterns and biblical truths behind why some people enjoy seeing you fail. Stay with me, because understanding this isn't just about protecting your peace. It's about preserving your purpose. Why do some people celebrate your failure more than their own progress? Why does your downfall bring them a strange sense of relief? These aren't just questions. They are symptoms of something far deeper, buried beneath layers of denial, envy, and hidden wounds. There's a truth most people are too afraid to face. Your success doesn't just inspire others, it exposes them. Every time you rise, grow, or step into your calling, it reflects a mirror back to those around you, not a mirror of who you are, but of who they are not. Your courage exposes their passivity. Your discipline reveals their laziness. Your faith highlights their doubt. And rather than deal with the pain that comes from honest reflection, it becomes easier for them to quietly root for your collapse. Because if you fall, they don't have to change. This isn't about them being evil, it's about them being broken. They have not confronted the shadows within themselves. They have not wrestled with the disappointments they've buried beneath smiles and polite conversations. And so, in their subconscious, your success becomes an accusation, not because you are accusing them, but because their own soul is screaming, "You could have been more." Ecclesiastes 4:4 says, "I saw that all toil and all achievement spring from one person's envy of another. This too is meaningless, a chasing after the wind." Envy is not just a feeling, it is a spiritual distortion. It is the soul's refusal to celebrate what it could have become. And so, some people smile when you fail, not because they hate you, but because it gives them relief. Relief from the pressure to grow, relief from the feeling of being left behind, relief from the haunting echo of their abandoned potential. But here is where it gets dangerous: when you begin to internalize their reaction, when you start shrinking just to keep others comfortable. When you dim your light so they won't feel blind, that is when the enemy wins, because God did not call you to blend in. He called you to stand out. He did not anoint you to keep the peace. He anointed you to break chains. You must understand this. Their reaction to your failure says more about their inner condition than it ever says about your destiny. Your rise threatens what they've buried, but don't stop rising. Your light may expose their shadows, but it also invites them to heal, if they're willing. So don't apologize for growing. Don't explain your obedience, and don't carry the guilt of someone else's wounds. Because when God begins to elevate you, the people who love you will rise with you, and those who resent you, they'll simply reveal they were never with you to begin with. When someone secretly hopes you fail, it's not usually about what you've done. It's about what they fear they'll never become. Beneath the surface of their smile, behind their kind words, hides a deeply wounded ego. One that feels threatened not by your actions but by your existence. You see, the ego is fragile. It survives by comparison, and it feeds on being superior, even if that superiority is only imagined. When you start to grow, evolve, and walk in your God-given identity, you unintentionally disrupt that illusion. Your life begins to serve as a reminder of everything they feel they're not. That's why they need you to fail. Because if you succeed, they are forced to confront the haunting question, "Why not me?" and rather than doing the hard, humbling work of self-examination, they turn to criticism, mockery, or passive celebration of your setbacks. This is why Paul wrote in Galatians 5:26, "Let us not become conceited, provoking one another, envying one another." Conceit and envy walk hand in hand. When someone's identity is built on feeling above others, they are easily provoked by your progress. The wounded ego sees your growth not as inspiration, but as competition. But here's the tragedy: they don't realize they are not in competition with you. They are in conflict with themselves. Their soul is hungry for purpose, desperate for healing, but the ego builds walls instead of bridges. And so they live small, not because God limited them, but because they chose not to grow. Yet you must not carry the weight of their insecurity. You must not shrink to protect their illusion. The only way to heal a wounded ego is through truth and love. And sometimes that means allowing people to walk their own journey while you keep walking yours. Because you were not created to live beneath the expectations of the broken. You were created to reflect the glory of the one who heals every wound, restores every soul, and calls you to rise. Even if others hope you won't, there is a force more ancient than emotion, more powerful than words, a spiritual current that flows beneath human behavior. Envy is not just psychological, it is spiritual, and when people enjoy your failure, it is often because they have become entangled in a battle far greater than they realize. James 3:16 warns us clearly, "For where envy and self-seeking exist, confusion and every evil thing are there." That means when someone harbors jealousy in their heart, they are opening the door to spiritual disorder. What starts as silent comparison soon becomes a breeding ground for resentment, sabotage, and even celebration when you fall. But they don't realize they are being used. Yes, used. Envy is a weapon the enemy wields in silence. He doesn't shout through those who envy you. He whispers lies into their insecurity. He stirs up their wounds and blinds them with bitterness. And without even knowing it, they become instruments of opposition, cheering for your collapse not from a place of strength, but from spiritual blindness. This is why spiritual warfare is real. Ephesians 6:12 reminds us that we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and powers. The person who smiles when you fail is not your enemy. They are simply a soul under the influence of one. The real battle isn't against them, it's against the spirit that feeds their envy. But here's the victory: when you recognize this, you stop taking their behavior personally. You stop being paralyzed by their approval or their silence. You start praying not just for protection, but for their deliverance, because the higher God calls you, the more opposition you'll face. Not always from strangers, but from familiar faces trapped in spiritual bondage. So when you see someone enjoy your fall, don't retaliate. Stand firm, pray deeper, and walk in your authority, because every attempt to see you fail is only giving God a new stage to reveal His power in your life. The story of Cain and Abel is not just a tale from Genesis. It's a revelation of a pattern that still plays out in human hearts today. Cain and Abel both brought offerings to God. Abel's was accepted. Cain's was not. But instead of self-reflection, Cain turned his anger toward Abel, not because Abel did anything wrong, but because Abel's righteousness exposed Cain's negligence. And so, in his jealousy, Cain killed the very person who had done nothing but honor God. This is what happens when people walk closely with you but secretly harbor resentment. Proximity breeds contempt when someone is unwilling to grow. The closer they are to your success, the more painfully they feel their own failure. And just like Cain, instead of humbling themselves before God, they turn their frustration toward you. You will notice this spirit not in strangers, but in the ones who know your journey best, friends. Colleagues, even family. Their resentment doesn't come from ignorance. It comes from access. They've seen your sacrifices. They know your struggles. But when they see you walking in favor, they feel bypassed by God. Genesis 4:6-7 reveals the Lord's response to Cain. "Why are you angry? Why is your face downcast? If you do what is right, will you not be accepted?" This shows us something powerful. God wasn't punishing Cain, He was inviting him to grow. But Cain chose bitterness over betterment, and that's the choice people make even now. When they see you walking in obedience and being blessed, they too are given a choice to rise or to resent. But hear this: you are not responsible for their choice. You must not stop offering your best to God just because it makes others uncomfortable. Don't let Cain's spirit cause you to shrink. Your life is a testimony, not a threat. But to those unwilling to confront their own hearts, your obedience will always feel like an offense. Stay focused, keep honoring God, and trust that the same God who saw Abel sees you, even if some people around you don't. Have you ever wondered why someone else's bitterness seems strangely targeted at your joy? Why your peace agitates their spirit? It's because they are not reacting to you. They are reacting to the parts of themselves they've never healed. This is the power of projection. Projection is when a person unconsciously takes emotions, fears, or failures they cannot accept within themselves and attributes them to someone else. In other words, they see in you what they can't bear to confront in themselves. Your discipline reminds them of their procrastination. Your obedience to God reminds them of their rebellion. Your boldness reveals their silence. Your joy highlights their sadness. They begin to treat you with hostility, not because of something you've done wrong, but because your life becomes a mirror, one they never asked to look into. Jesus faced this too. In John 10:32, he said, "I have shown you many good works from the Father. For which of these do you stone me?" He did nothing but good, yet many hated him. Why? Because his presence exposed their darkness, his light revealed their shadows, his truth unveiled their lies, and so their solution wasn't to repent, it was to reject. This same dynamic is at play today. The people who enjoy seeing you fall are often at war with themselves. When they see you succeed, it pokes at their unfulfilled purpose. When they see you loved, it awakens their old wounds of abandonment. When you're free, it reminds them they're still bound. But here's what you must understand. You are not their enemy. You are their mirror, and the reflection terrifies them. So don't take their behavior personally. Their projection is not your identity. Let them wrestle with what they see, while you keep becoming what God called you to be. Because even if they can't celebrate your growth, heaven does. And heaven's applause is the only affirmation that truly matters. There is a deep ache inside those who secretly rejoice at your setbacks, a silent wound they've carried often since childhood, the wound of rejection. These individuals have lived so long without true validation, without being seen, heard, or cherished, that they begin to internalize a dangerous belief: if I can't rise, at least I'm not the only one down. This is the psychology of rejection. When a person feels unloved, overlooked, or unworthy, they begin to attach their value to the downfall of others, not because they are evil, but because they are trying to survive their own pain. Your failure to them becomes proof that they are not alone in their suffering. It's a twisted comfort, and when you begin to flourish, when God starts elevating you, blessing you, and giving you opportunities they never receive, it threatens their entire belief system. They begin to ask, why them and not me? And rather than deal with that question in prayer, in growth, in repentance, they choose resentment. Proverbs 27:4 says, "Wrath is cruel, anger is overwhelming, but who can stand before jealousy?" Jealousy rooted in rejection is not passive, it's dangerous. It silently wishes for your fall so that their pain doesn't feel as isolating. But hear this, you are not responsible for the pain they never healed. You were not called to dim your destiny to comfort someone else's dysfunction. Your life is not a sacrifice to soothe someone else's insecurity. You must recognize the spirit behind it and respond with wisdom. Don't fight them. Pray for them. Don't retreat. Keep building. Don't explain yourself. Stay obedient. God did not bring you this far just to slow down for those who won't face their brokenness. The same healing they need is available to them, but they must choose it just as you did. So walk in grace, but walk in boldness. Because your purpose is too urgent to be delayed by someone else's refusal to be whole. Sometimes the people who try the hardest to bring you down are unknowingly helping you rise. What they meant for harm, God uses for elevation. This is the mystery of divine providence. God doesn't just work in spite of your enemies. He often works through them. Genesis 50:20 captures this truth perfectly. You intended to harm me, but God intended it for good to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Joseph's brothers betrayed him, sold him, and tried to erase his destiny, but every act of opposition became a step toward the palace. Every betrayal was a divine redirection. The same is true for you. That person who hoped you'd fall, they just revealed who you no longer need to carry. The one who mocked your dream, they sharpened your focus. The one who spread rumors when you stumbled, they drove you deeper into God's presence. Their opposition was not a setback. It was a setup for what God had already planned. You see, God wastes nothing, not your pain, not your losses, not even the malice of others. Everything they try to use to destroy you becomes material for your testimony. Romans 8:28 says, "And we know that all things work together for good to those who love God and are called according to His purpose." That includes betrayal, that includes failure, that includes every attempt to tear you down. So when people enjoy your failures, don't let their laughter wound your identity. Smile, not out of pride, but out of prophetic confidence, because their opposition only confirms what heaven already knows. You are marked for purpose. Let them plot, let them talk, let them watch, because soon they'll see that everything they tried to use against you only became fuel for your rise. And when you arrive at the place God has prepared for you, like Joseph, you'll be able to say, "You meant it for evil, but God meant it for good." That's divine justice, that's kingdom reversal, and it's already in motion. When others hope for your failure, the greatest danger isn't in what they say or do, it's in what you start believing because of them. Bitterness is subtle, it creeps in like smoke after a fire. The rejection, the envy, the betrayal, it hurts, and if you're not careful, it begins to shape your perspective. You start to second guess your calling. You shrink your dreams, you start walking not by faith, but by fear of what others might say next. But hear this clearly, you cannot afford to let bitterness define your direction. Hebrews 12:15 gives us a warning. See to it that no one fails to obtain the grace of God, that no root of bitterness springs up and causes trouble, and by it many become defiled. Bitterness doesn't just infect you, it spills into everything connected to you. It poisons relationships, it clouds discernment, it hijacks your joy, and worst of all, it distracts you from God's voice. That's exactly what the enemy wants. If he can't destroy your calling, he'll try to detour your spirit. If he can't stop your assignment, he'll try to corrupt your attitude. But remember, your assignment is too sacred to be surrendered to resentment. You were called to be light. You were chosen to walk in truth. And that means you must release the people who hurt you, not because they deserve it, but because you do. You deserve to walk free. You deserve to keep moving forward without the weight of bitterness anchoring your soul. So how do you stay aligned with God's vision? You forgive not just once, but every time your heart starts to close. You pray not just for your destiny, but even for those who tried to derail it. And most importantly, you keep obeying God, even when it would be easier to fight people instead of fulfilling purpose. Let them talk, let them misunderstand, let them celebrate your stumbles, but you stay rooted in grace, driven by vision and fueled by the one who called you. Because what God put in you is not just bigger than their opinion, it's stronger than their rejection, and it will come to pass if you don't let bitterness take his place. Your journey is not about proving anyone wrong, it's about proving God right. Too often, we waste energy trying to silence critics, trying to impress doubters, or trying to show people who left that we didn't need them. But that's not purpose, that's pride in disguise, and pride, even when it's dressed in pain, will always lead you off course. You weren't called to live in reaction to those who hurt you. You were called to live in response to the one who created you. Philippians 3:14 says, "I press on toward the goal for the prize of the upward call of God in Christ Jesus." That means your eyes must be on the call, not the crowd. Your assignment is upward, your validation is divine, and your reward is eternal. Let them watch, let them wonder, let them whisper, but don't let them distract you. Keep showing up, keep walking in truth. Keep building what God told you to build, even if no one claps, even if some secretly hope you fail, because your obedience isn't performance, it's warfare. Every step forward is an act of resistance against fear, against shame, against spiritual attack. And with every step, heaven is backing you, so release the need to be understood. Let go of the obsession to be vindicated. God will handle your reputation. Your job is to finish the race. Because in the end, it won't be the approval of man that crowns you. It will be the voice of the Father saying, "Well done, good and faithful servant." That's why you must keep going, not to prove a point, but to fulfill a purpose.